I can't hear you.
Sorry, you hear nothing I said? Okay,
Nothing.
I'll start over again. Rabbi
Thank
say,
you.
so good Abend, and Elam is coming on slow tonight, but the Tuesday night is not one of our normal nights, so I understand that. We had this morning we opened up the discussion of whether Kriyas HaTorah is a chayvas sibur and a chayvas yachid, and we did the first portion of that by going through some of the lashonos in the Rishonim. Seems to be reasonably unambiguous lashon in the Mulchamos in Megillah, in his machlekes with the Balamoyer, and the Balamoyer's machlekes with the Rif. And lo and behold, as I said, many hundreds of years later, turned out to be a spirited discussion in the Achronim, along with a couple of stories. Stories was that Reb Chaim had to defend his shita to many people. One of them he had to defend it to was his mechut Nervella Pruzhanow. That's the fancy way of saying Rabbi Feinstein, who understood fairly enough that the words in the Ramban say chayvas sibur means chayvas sibur. And the second person we found out through the good offices of Michal Yehuda, who was an expert on stories, also because we heard many of them from people like Brisker Rub and such, that the and from Ayman, that the Shiva of Radin, Rabbi Lodinsky, his Aniko lived on my block, believe it or not, in the I think it was his Aniko, maybe not, maybe it was his nephew. His name was Ramosha, so it couldn't have been his son. But it was Nifter about 15 years ago. It would probably be 90 plus by now. So it could have been the Ramosha Lodinsky's Aniko, maybe. Either his Aniko or his nephew or whatever. Anyway, Ramosha Lodinsky also was involved here. And in Lodz, the famous Polish town, Chaim was once in Lodz for reasons unknown. And Chaim had a discussion with Ramosha Lodinsky about the Chai Adam. Chai Adam, as we saw this morning, has a suffix, and it's brought in the Bir Halacha, and it's a Bayit Leifshata on the Chai Adam. He's what we call bribes by a suffix, mistapek, as to whether or not, if there are people there did not hear Kriyas HaTorah, can you do Kriyas HaTorah again? Maybe you need 10 people there. So there were Rav of a Minyan in the story in Lodz that did not hear Kriyas HaTorah, and they wanted to lay. And Reb Chaim said, no, need 10. And the Shiva of Radin said, what do you mean? What do you mean? Radin says, it's not a chayvas yachid, it's a chayvas sibur. So they landed already. Once they landed earlier, so the chayvas sibur, they were yaitza, and once we had Rav of a Minyan, it should be sufficient. The Kriyas HaTorah, Reb Chaim said, "Achein, that this is a suffix in the Chai Adam, but I hold Nishtazai." And Ramosha Lodinsky asked him, "What about the Lashon of the Ramban?" So that this is Chayvas Tzibur. Reb Chaim fended off this raya in a Chudishtika bibliographical way. And we have Edis that this was the story. I'll call upon him without all the color. The bottom line is Reb Chaim held that Kriyas HaTorah is chayvas yachid, but it has to be read by 10. Somebody will say, but that's not a chayvas yachid, it's a chayvas sibur. Gerecht. So we have a lamdish construct here where we're putting together two issues. By the way, let me repeat my administrative tasks that were been handed to me by my colleagues. What are four things? Yeah, I think we're just about finished with Megillah, but we're still short on my cutting. So if you're planning to come to Israel, even if you're not, I think we're still short about 6 or 7 lot in my cutting. If you can, Dr. Litterach will send out another reiteration of the spreadsheet. I think we're, Mordechai, remember which 6 spot we were short? Do you remember?
I think it was Yud Gimel to
Yud Zayin?
Yud Zion, yeah. Not much, yeah.
Not much. Okay, I bet it's going to take a blood. That was number 1. Number 2, hold on a second, please. Number two, there was the Siyam. Number 2 was see if you can be mishtatif in our Karsa type to Rabbi Weiss and Kallah. Number 3 is you want to come to Bnei Brak. A couple of people answered, but not all that many, which doesn't mean much because I know even though people are thinking of coming don't answer, but there's an nafkamila dina here because we don't have any idea in the new COVID era how many people want to come, how many people don't want to come. It's just everything is different this year, so it would be helpful for us to know. I'll tell you, Pashat, we need to know what the size of the place we need to get. So there's really 2 choices. We go out to a shul or a hall, or we go into the homes of these senior Gedolei Yisrael. If we're going to homes of Gedolei Yisrael, it has to be a small crowd. If it's more, then we will have to get outside. Adkan, please let us know. Okay, so the Talmud, Reb Chaim, the Birk Shmuel, Baruch Ber, out of nowhere. When I say out of nowhere, this is not a place you look for it normally in your Vamis. It's brought here on page 10, but let me first read it before the island starts trying to read. It doesn't matter because you won't be able to. It's okay. You won't be able to. You can put it on because no way to figure out reading it. It's very difficult stuff to figure out. He has this shaila of Kriyas Torah is chal only on the tzibur, and when 10 people together, then there is a chiyuv to read Kriyas Torah, or no, it's a chiyuv and call yachid, but it's impossible to mekayim it until you get to the asara, and of course that, as we already know, is we already knew that this is the shita of his Rebbe Reb Chaim, but the Birka Shmuel tells it back in a shtickle, in a novelty way. And out of all places, it comes out of Hilchos Mikvos, and he has a shaila of what the Yisayid of the Lumdus of the Psul of Mayim Shuvim. And B'teicha Dvarim, he goes into what Raiv is all about. There's a halachna Torah called Ruba Kakula, Acher Rab Lahatais, and therefore we follow several different types of Raiv in the Torah. There's Raiv in the Sanhedrin, there's Ruba di Sekaman, there's Ruba Lesekaman, there are Raivs such as Tesha Chanayos, there are Raivs that are scientific truisms, principles. There are Raivs that follow psychology of people, behavioral patterns. Rav Bilas Achrabal, I can give you 100 different, not 100, but I can give you scores of different types of examples that the Chazal Roshain Rochain bring Legabi Raiv. Okay, so in order to illustrate what is the site of Din Raiv, Rabbi brings from Reb Chaim this shaila. He says Does Rubai Kukulai help to create a Sarah in the Kriyas Torah or Kriyas Megillah or Chazaras Hashatz? Says the Birchah Shmuel, I heard from the Rabbi that they all are Seivev around one Yisaid. They're all Seivev around one Yisaid. In other words, all these halachas, what is the mechayev? What's the criteria which we're required to have? When you need a sarah, does that mean, for example, in Kriyas Torah or Megillah or Chazaras Hashatz, that the chiyuv is chal on all people at the same time, simultaneously, and they have to be together to create a oneness in order to have a sufficient tzibur for that mitzvah. As long as you don't have 10, there's no chiyuv of Kriyas Torah. Or no. In other words, 9 is garnished. 9 is not 9/10 of the way there. It's not felt at center. You have nothing. Or no. Do I say that the chiyuv of Kriyas Torah Mikra Megillah is chal on every single person? But the mitzias is that we don't lane it until you have 10 yechidim together. Everybody understand that? According to the first side of the Chakira, there's no chiyuv until 10 people are there. Until 10 people are there, the 9 guys in the room have no chiyuv on them. Because 9 is not 10. And 9 are 9 people. They're not mechuyev individually. They're nothing. Until these 9 metamorphosize into 10, then the chiyuv devolves on all 10 simultaneously, comes down Shemayim, and now you have chiyuv to read Kriyas Torah. That's side one of the chiyuv. Or no, I'm saying basically everything we said till today, but with a different more lumps. Or no, that the pshat is that each person, number 1 through 9, has a chiyuv. But there's an ikuf. There's a block. There is a something preventing us to be able to read Kriyas Torah. And what's that? 10 yechidim who have a chiyuv need to be there in order to programmatically and procedurally read Kriyas Torah. Each one has a chiyuv. Absolutely, each one has a chiyuv. You walk into shul, you have a chiyuv to read, to hear Kriyas Torah. But you can't do it until you have 10. That's tzad base. Rabbi say, I see I'm talking to myself today, which I don't know, I don't prefer. So whoever can, certainly if you're used to this, and even if you're not used to this, you can open up the your box so I can see you and talk to you. I'd prefer that because that gives me a little chizuk that I know that there's somebody learning with people on Zoom is very challenging because you talk to yourself. And as much as I love to talk to myself, I occasionally like to talk to intelligent people. So if you wish, Mordechai Hatzadik will open up your microphones and your whatevers, and if I can see you and hear you and B'cholu would be better. Everybody understand this Chakira? Yes. Okay, Barish, thank you. Everybody understand this Chakira? Yes. Okay, so in order to do that, you have to be promoted. You have to be promoted. Whoever answered, I appreciate that. I'm making you, assuming you're the shliach for everybody else. Okay, so let's see how Baruch tells it back. It's what I said earlier, that's not so, the Baruch is written in difficult language. This one grada is one of the reasonably straightforwardly clear written Baruch bears. So let's see where the slide line is. K'mesh Shvatim, Pi Meir Kadosh Yisrael, in Mahani Kadosh Yisrael. Only there. The Rebbe's Kadosh Yisrael. You'll usually hear that about at Meir. Amani right, Medin Rubek Kulel Tzar for Sarv Kriyas Torah is going to know. I'm the Bchaldinim Gel Tal B'Chat Svar. Yes, Lachar. I imagine the Sarv Chalach Medin Lilo in the Chiyuv Shel Kriyas Torah because until you have 10 people in the room, you have nothing. Calls my like Sarv Lek Chiyuv Klaus was Torah. Yo, shots. I like. Never the Chishul Kristera, make a Megillah for Shatz, Kallah, fill out Achad, the Ein, Dun, Ein, of them, that was all Yachad, Leishna, Dinder, period. That's the Chakir. She says, now let's take it to the Lamaisa. What's the Lamaisa? So if you go with that side of the Chakir, the Chiv Nasa Dafka Yisar B'Yachad, this first side of Chakir, Shayach Adinderu Kakulai, the Lekachiv Klau. Rubai Kakulai means that the Rav has a Chefzi to it. The Rav has some taikif to it. The Rav has some standing. If there's nothing there until everything is there, then there's what's Shaykh say Rubai Kakulai. There's nothing there. Why would Rav help? You have nothing there. It's like you walk into a room and there's nobody there. There's 9 people there. 9 is 0. So you have 10, you have 0. So Rubai Kakulai should not help. And afilu a miyut, there's no chiyuv from the miyut either. Why? Because until you have 10, you have zip. However, if I'm going to say that chiyuv is chal even on every single person, but the din is you need 10 to proceed to read, then the shayach din of Rubai Kakulai, because there's a rayv chiyuv of miyut p'tur, and this is a din of kol Torah kula that you say Rubai Kakulai. That kind of divrei Rabbi Chaim. Does everybody understand this? Do I have to repeat this again? Please do not be shy.
One more time would be good.
One more time. Okay. Did the first part resonate?
Yeah.
Yes. So now let's take it to the second part. So the first part we understand. Part A, the side A is that you got nothing until you have everything, right? All for one and one for all, nothing. And the second is no. Each one counts, pruta and star, but you can't read until you get 10. Says Reb Chaim that the halach of Rubai Kakulai only makes sense according to the second set. You're aggregating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Came along Torah says you don't need 9, you don't need 10, you have 6. 6 is good enough. Why? Because till you got to 6, the first 5 were meaningful. 6 puts you over the right. Like there's custom of the right in the Torah, that 6 is like 10. But if the shot is a 1 through 5 or 0 until you get to 10, then why should Rubai Kakulai work? There's nothing to expand. There's nothing to magically expand with a halacha that Rubai Kakulai should accomplish. Not that I've garnished in Yeshivish parlance. Everybody clear?
I'm going to go on silent soon. I'm going into the car to go to the airport.
Everybody should do whatever they have to do. Everybody who learns with us is a bonus. Okay, so.
Here, I'm giving you this.
It says, don't think, by the way, the next paragraph, it says, don't think that, by the way, Kristera Megillah and Minyan are all the same thing. Maybe some are this way and some are that way. And he doesn't tell you exactly which way is which. What do we see out of this? That Chaim was going to stop it if it's a chayvus sibur, it's a chayvus yachid, and it's clear that if it was a chayvus sibur, Rav Minyan would not help, because until you have a tzibur, you have nothing. And as we said earlier, in the morning's recitation of Chaim, believe it or not, there is a Igros Moshe, which is on point. This Igros Moshe in Chelegav Simchav Ches, it's I'm looking at it now and bite off more than I can chew here, because it's a you know, it would be it would be I mean, if you see on page starts with Mem Hey, and it goes through Mem Vav, Mem Ches, it's copied here because Ramesha Kedavik goes through every single important sheet in the Indian and Magen Ram and all the sheets of the Daily Achronim and the Paiskim, etc., and all the parallel sugyas and the Megillah, and he tries to for the Ramban, and what I'm going to do here is, because we start learning this Ramesha inside, we're not getting out of it. I'm just going to leave it for you for future reference. Instead, what I'll do is, I'm going to back into it by going into the theory Shlomo Zalman learns, and then we'll back into this Ramesha before we finish between the on page Nun, Rabbi Mordechai, is a page. Mem Tes. There is another reiteration of this Reb Chaim, and as you'll see in the footnote, maybe we can use the footnote to help us to cheat here a little bit. If you look on page Mem Tes, so he brings the Gemara Megillah, and it brings the Baruch Ber, goes all the way down till the last paragraph. This is the lashon of the Rabbi Shmuel Ketzarasa. If you look in Shin Pei Dalet on the bottom, he says, "Chazin Shleim Dadin Rukula Ulagabe Chayavim." And he says, those people who are B'chuyev Kristerva, Rikus Moshe, that's the one that we skipped over. Loy made that din ruga kekula yuligabi ha'nashim. L'chein kishiyesh asara v'rayv chayavim. After v'chayves tzibur shayach loyma ruga kekula. Okay, there you have a digest. Ramesha is chaylik with Chaim's Havana, and it's a short digest of it. I'm going to show you this two approaches here, and then we'll see if we have time. We'll come back to take some pieces out of the Ramesha separately. The reason why I'm hesitating here is because I don't think it's not going to do much for our Havana the Sugya to do what we should do, and have to go through the Sigus Moshe totally inside. So first, let me get as much as I can in, and then we'll go back to it. Rabbi Zalman discusses this question. Before we get to the Rabbi Zalman, let's see how the Aruch HaShulchan learns. The Aruch HaShulchan is on Daf Amud Tes Zayin, on the bottom, on Yudalit. He says, sorry to move you around here, Rabbi Mordechai, but I was hesitating here because I'm not sure that I'll be able to go through this whole information side. I'm going to circle back to it to show you how he tries to bring that out. He tries to for the Ramban, but the Aruch HaShulchan says, he brings a Magen Avram. He says, "Yesh misha kasef shemaitziur shayim sefer Torah v'karoba, ein leshniyim lights he sefer Torah pamacheres lekrizba akan l'shayim." This is a Magen Avram b'shem sefer Mishpatei Shmuel. Why? Because you need 10. The ain't shum havana l'zeh. V'yesh misha pirish There are those who explain, and it's the prima god. The Kvanas, the Shem Yem Sheba Cheres Yerushalayim Pagam. Maybe the Shiling Kvayt Sefer Torah. Var Timul Links Exeris Chadashais. Will Hach Pamu Tois. Well, it says in late Sefer Torah Pama Cheres. Not clear. Maybe means a Cheres. Sarah claims Sefer Torah Cheres. Why should it be better? Because there's Leitzi Lazlo Rishayna. And he says, I'm going to tell you a different shot. He says, let me tell you outside what he says. He says, Baruch Hu and Kedusha are fundamentally different than Kriyas Torah. Why? Because Baruch Hu and Kedusha, in its chefza, every yachid is clearly chayiv. As we said earlier, every yachid is mechuyev in Baruch Hu and every yachid is mechuyev in Kedusha. But that's not Kriyas Torah, he says. Not Kriyas Torah. You look inside. Abu Kriyas Torah nearly bar the cholek asar shlasham Kriyas Torah and Kriyas Torah. Dafki no tzilish kol yachid chayaba. Each yachid has an absolute chiyuv. Kein eisen badei baruch hu dush zuminan tefillah, because everybody needs to be mekayim these mitzvahs. Kriyas Torah ain't ikar chiyuv rak basar. V'fiz hachi perusha. So my tziyur is trying to say b'teva karba. K'layim hashniya mayu b'is ma'is shlei yispalo adayim. He comes up with a new pshat. 1 second, please, Rabbi say. So, Abu Kriyas Torah ain't ikra chiyuv rak basara. The ikra chiyuv Kriyas Torah is only if it is asara. Lafiz hachi perushay. It might see you. Arishonim say b'Torah karuba, and Vashima b'shas ma'aser that just didn't daven yet. We saw the scenario earlier. Pledged by somebody else. Well, Chayin Elishniim likes to say b'Torah pamacheres kishpalu. They already heard it's Kriyas Torah. Either heard Shalei Kasidron, they heard it out of order. They heard before davening. No. So what? Who says that Kriyas Torah is Chiyuv Achat Tefillah? I don't know. Every Shiur book in the world has used this. Gotten up late, ran into shul, then got Kriyas Torah. Did Kriyas Torah before Tefillah. Okay, I was a Shiur book once too. I probably did that too once. Affiliation mikdash leisham shu asar shaleishamu, because of this reason. So the Shulchan more or less follows the same concept. I'm going to leave the Ravaz out here for a second. Let's go to see how the Stipler and his Chutner Shlomo Zalman dealt with this issue of Tzibur Yachid. So the Stipler in Bron Archas Rabbeinu, the Archas Rabbeinu is the minhagim of the Stipler and the Chazon Ish. Let me first tell you outside, basically. The Stipler, even if he davened Yechidus in Sheni Chamishay, but he went to daven, he went to Kriyas Torah shul. And the Baal Archas Rabbeinu here is made that he used to see the Chazon Ish going to shul Beis Hill, she can vision it, which is close to the Chazon Ish's house, the Kriyas Torah. And you can see it in Aleph, my Rabbi Shlita, that's a Stipler, after Shbal B'Chidus, Kriyas Torah, Beis Knesses, Shkai B'Shim Chazon Ish, Yisahar B'Pam Bala Beis Knesses Beis Hill, which my Kriyas Torah. And then Chaim tells him, even when his father was sick, and he had fever, and he couldn't daven with a tzibur. But on Monday and Thursday, he was mitametz. He mamish put all his keiches into to go to shul to Kriyas Torah, and he went to Merchakim to Mechapes Minul Kriyas Torah, even though it was weak, and it was never Machzer Kriyas Torah B'Tzibur. So the question is why? When the Chazon Ish heard this, the Chazon Ish asked his brother-in-law, the Stipler. He said, "Isn't Kriyas Torah Chayv Tzibur, and it's not a Chiyuv Yachid." One second, Rabbi Sai. This is my leader of Planet Cinnamon. I have to tell him something. Give me a second. Yeah, if anyone wants to know, wanted to know certain things, so you can start preparing. Okay, so the shaila is the Chazon Ish said, "Why do you have to go to Kriyas Torah? It's Chayv Tzibur." Chayv Tzibur Leil Yachid. Perish Kriyas Niskal Yachid Mispal B'Yachid. Shav Chabos Mekris Chayv Tzibur. Rak Ilu Til Mishmar B'Tzibur Shukar B'Torah. Boom, pretty strong language here from the Chazon Ish, and no ambiguity. Says Reb Chaim, even though not sure if he's referring to the Stipler or to the Chazon Ish, that even though the Chayra, that is what the Svar is Naisenes, and he sends you to Bir Alacha in Kuf Lamed Hey.
Went on mute.
Rabbi Gottesman, you're on mute.
Sorry. And then he sends you to the Bir Alacha in Kuf Mem Hey, which we will see, but we're there. He says, nevertheless, Kol Makayim L'Maisa Sipalai. No, anybody? Mordechai, you have your marker? Or this doesn't work in this one? Akasha Harar Mag.
Adwas Moran Goinai. No.
It's a person.
Uh-huh.
Shemaran, that's Chazon Ish, Kshugar Vilna, Ashnas Bal Bichidis, Sachar Agalav, and Nasa Kampar, Seil Smay Kriyas Torah. Chein Ani Shemati, Me Harav. You got to be a real expert in coverage bomb for this. This must be the Stipler. I am probably Chidis basic of a secret. Pretty startling. But there was no Vesikim in Nebrak. I don't know. This Stipler came a couple of years after the Chazon Ish. You tell me there was no Vesikim in it. And he brings a story here. In Tafshin Ches, 1948, the Chazon Ish was sick for a whole month. And he didn't hear Kriyas Torah. And this goes to a Corona Shaila. And when he got better, he wanted to hear all the seders that he missed. So the Kohen came, and the Balkaira started reading from the seder that he had missed. And he read all 4 seders until Sheni in the Parsha of the week. And this followed a story that happened 100 and whatever years earlier, 1948 till 1780 something. When the Goyen came out of the base of Sayar, he called him Al-Khair in Vilna. They should read all the 4 sidrais. The guy was locked up in jail as a function of a Hachana, and he missed 4 parshiyos. So he asked them to read all the 4 parshiyos. So they see that L'chaira, both the Chazon Ish and the Gaon held that it was Chayvus Yachid. Because why do you have to hear it again? Teretz is not a riot. Why? Because there was no take chiyuv on them to actually hear this, because clearly Kriyas Torah is a Chayvus Tzibur, but they wanted to make sure they were Mekayim this din of Hashlomo shel Parshiyos Torah Metzibur. They wanted to hear all the Parshiyos, and the guy in the Chazon Ish had different haggis than the rest of Klal Yisrael. Okay, Hachana, a really contradictory set of stories about the Chazon Ish and the disciple, whether they felt it was Chayvus Gavra or Chayvus Yachid. Do we have the Bir Lacha that was referenced here? We'll come back to the famous Sefer Torah in the jail story to close. We can, but let's see how Shlomo Zalman approaches Yachid and Tzibur. So in the Shlomo, I'm going to tell you what he says outside first, and then we can see inside. Rabbi Zalman brings Reb Chaim that makes a chiluk between Kriya and Sheni Chamishi and Kriya Yom Shabbos. He says Sheni Chamishi is a Chayvus Tzibur, and Kriya Yom Shabbos is a Chayva Kol Yachid v'Yachid. Reb Chaim conceded that Beis and Hay is a Chayvus Tzibur. But the asked from Shlomo Zalman, how could you say that? They both come from the same source, the same Gemara Baba Kama, the same Yelchosh Gimel Yom B'Lei Torah, Shabbos. It's not cut up. Let's go through the whole week without a stop. So Mechatesa, that should be different. Let's see how it says in size. He brings a raya from the Gemara in Mein Katan Daf Chaf Beis. Rabbi say, if you didn't, we don't have Daf Chaf Beis in our list. I think we do, but if not, we can now get a shtickle out of that. Nasi Shameis Beis Batim Medrashos Kulam Betelim. Ubate Bnei Knesses Nechmasel Beis Knesses V'Kairin Shiva. What does that mean? Says Rashi, what does that mean? That as a sign of Avelis, they went into the shul and they didn't daven together with a minyan. Each one davened in his house. Then they came to shul and they were kaira shivik kroyim for Kriyas Torah, Fair Shirayah and Gemara. The fact that nobody brought this raya until the Alicha Shleima, until Shlomo Zalman, writing in sometime in the 70s. I don't know when he wrote this, but that's when it was published, only in the 90s. He telling me that no one would bring this raya before seems to be a fair shiraya. Look how the Rambam brings this halacha. So clearly, Kallah should spell b'chinas k'machne lebrikos beis knesses. So you see, it's a chayvus yachid, because presumably in shul they're reading for other people. So if you belong to the shul, the Bnei Knesses, what do you need to go to shul for? Let them read it without you, because there's 7 avails you want to steal. He said, look at the Rambam in Hilchos Avelis when it's mighty this lashon. Bnei Seknes lashon b'Shabbos v'Knesses v'Karen Shiva v'Yotze, which means they're not davening together, but they're going to shul. Mashma dafka b'Shabbos v'Derech v'Chamisi of Shabbos and not chain v'Chamishi. The Mishnah asked this shayla. So he says, Reb Chaim says, from this Rambam, we don't have this Rambam here, I don't think, but this Rambam is of a fair shiraya, that the chiv of Kriyas Torah and Shabbos is taka a chayvus yachid, because the Rambam only says Shabbos, doesn't add Chaim Chamishi, and the Chiyuv of Kriyas Torah on Shabbos, on Chaim Chamishi, is a Chayvas Sibur, and therefore you don't have to go to Shul. Director Shlomo Zalman, Tzarech Biur in the brackets. What's the difference? The Makayr is the same. Nearly Ein Raya. The Kriyas Torah have a Chayvas Yachid. Nimasha Kasav Rambam Peri Gimel Tefillah Halacha Yud. Okay, this I'm going to leave for the moment because this is an important sugya that we're going to have to get to when we learn. I think Baruch Mark is going to speak about this. That the Rush, when he brings a Rabbi, it says that the halacha is same for Shein v'Chamishi. Therefore, this Gemara, which tells you that you have to go to Shul to Kriyas Torah, makes no difference between Shabbos and Shein Chamishi. Therefore, Azlalei Reb Chaim's Chiluk. Chaim is saying it in the Rabbah. Kasha. Whenever you ever steer against Reb Chaim's Chiddush, you can always say it's in the Rambam. It's not in the. It's not in the. Not in the Rush. Okay. Says Shlomo Zalman. I'll tell you another pshat. Says, Amas Yesh Lema, Shekarim basic Knesses, Ketele Levatul basic Knesses Legamri. No, the reason why they're carrying the basic Knesses is because we don't want to be Mevatul the basic Knesses. Chemi being similar basic Knesses, Machnisan Eisel Chayz basic Torah. You don't want to have shul closed down on Shabbos. And he says, I'll tell you another chiddush which comes out of this, that the increase of Torah is not a chiyuv of chayvas tefillah. Why? Because the tefillah, they daven b'yechidus. So why are they coming to shul again? The teretz is they're coming to shul to be mechayim themselves with Kriyas Torah. And therefore, if they want to be kairei, they certainly could be kairei. And then he goes into the ches psukim, which I glassed over. He says, "Kimeduma shari isi." The Shabbos b'mincha, the chiyuv is only when there's 10. And there certainly is only when there's a tzibur. And therefore, if you dam b'yechidus and they came afterwards, there's no chiyuv for that. Why? I'm not sure, because if you as we said earlier, l'chayra is a Talmud Torah-dik halacha. We don't want people to be mevutl from Talmud Torah, so why should there be a difference if you daven before? And you're going to go hang out in the Kronos, even if you daven b'yechidus. I'm not sure what Shlomo Zalman means to say here, but he makes a chiluk here between Shabbos Mincha and Beis Vei. He expands upon this in the next page. He says, "Shekarim b'mincha b'Shabbos, b'Sheni b'Chamishi, achreinim kasvu sheyesh l'chalik on page Chafei. Sheyesh l'chalik bein Beis Vehei and mincha b'Shabbos. Beis Vehei is kol yachid. Mincha Shabbos and tzibur is not a chiyuv kol yachid." And he explains it a little bit more, and he answers the question that I raised. V'atam b'zeh. There you go, halfway through. V'atam b'zeh. Shebetakonas akriya b'shem chamishi. That's shlei elchul gimel v'Torah. By definition, everybody has a chiyuv Talmud Torah, so everybody has to hear Torah. Ma she'ein kain. Takonas akriya b'Shabbos. That is Yoshvei Kronos. Not clear exactly what the kind of Yoshvei Kronos is. Lav dafke it's a shlei elchul gimel yom Torah. It's not that, because I already heard Torah on Shabbos in the morning. So it can't be a Gimel Yom B'lei Torah. You can say it's a din, Chazal didn't want you to go late again and be Mevatel Torah. But it's not a din of Gimel Yom and B'lei Torah because you heard Torah in the morning. So that can't be. In such a case, therefore, Chiyuv of Kriyas Torah on Shabbos Mincha, there's no Chiyuv on every single person. It's only at the Kadas Tzibur, which has to worry that there's not too much pushtakim hanging around the Kronos. And therefore, to make sure that they don't go through a whole week without a Bissel Torah, but it's not a chayev, a chiyuv, a kol yachid b'yachid. This is much clearer than what he says in the Alicha Shlema. Here in the Mincha Shlema on Baba Kama, he explains it much clearer. Just to conclude, from Zalman's understanding of this, let's see what he says in the Halich Shlema on the next page. In the top, there's 3 parts to this. There's the top, the middle, and the bottom. Top says yes, all the Shiloh halacha between a Ben Eretz Yisrael and a Ben Chutz La'aretz. Ben Eretz Yisrael is mechuyev to hear Yantu Sheni Kriyas Torah Shel Ben Chutz La'aretz, even afim Yom Kriya Gab Ben Eretz Yisrael. So he says he's not mechuyev to hear an Israeli in America is not mechuyev to hear Kriya Yantu Sheni. Maybe it's Monday, so you have to hear a Kriya. Says from Zalman, no. And it can't be about Kairei for the Americans. Why? Because he's not mechuyev about Kriya. However, in Yom Kriya, if it's a day of Kriya, it's Monday, he's allowed to be mashlim a minute for them. This is the psak of Shlomo Zalman. So why not? Why is that taka azoi? So he says because the chiyuv is to hear Kriyas Torah on the Seder of Parshiyos. That's the chiyuv of the Israeli. He doesn't have to hear Kriyas Yantav again. Plus, at the bottom, on the bottom chavav, here's the chiyuv. Here's the vart. The gam b'lav hachi. There you go. Ein ze chayiv ala yachid. Ein chayiv tzibur. Ein kan tzibur akarin al piyas seder. There's no tzibur reading your Shabbos. So how could you mechuyev to read your thing? You're not mechuyev in that. You have no seder for this because you're an Israeli, and therefore you're not mechuyev to hear Kriyas Torah. Don't go to hear on the second day of Sukkot. Don't go to hear Shara Chesed Be'ez being read. Again, you're not mechuyev in that. It's not a kriya for you. And even if it's a Monday, it doesn't matter because it's not a kriya for you. The last thing I want to discuss today is the Neyela Maisa this year. On the next page. So here, this year we're going to have a little more fun here because Achar Pesach on Shabbos, which means the Israelis are jump ahead of us again this year. So we're not on the same page for quite a long time. So when they come from Chutz La'aretz to Israel, the Israelis are a week ahead of us, and you lost it. If you go to everybody is going to have a problem with this. They go to Israel like Baimer because it goes all the way till the middle of Midbar. If you look down in note 90, the Rabbi Frieden in the Sefer Yantav Sheni Kol Chasai says, "Aval l'shalom pratim har l'mashal asakain." Kasher the shalar kasher ben agua. Everybody heard all the parashiyos. Naza bar ben Amar. Mal ata b'datcha shinach b'dargash ben agua. All of a sudden, you're going to become machmer, and you're putting yourself on the gain. And chutzpah for you to even think that way. As I understand that, it's a frumak, and if you were so frum and everything else, then I would let you do this. I can the approach of Shlomo Zalman. So let's chazar over what we did today, because I'm going to stop here. What we did today was we started with Rabbi Ber. Rabbi Ber continues to explicate what we saw in Rabbi Chaim this morning, and the 2 chakiris on Chayvas Sibur and Chayvas Yachid. Depends how you understand what Sibur and Yachid is, and whether or not you can use Rubik Kulai to explain that. Shiloh of the Chayadim, this topic of this, and as we heard in the morning, the explanation of the Rabbi Chaim, how to fend off the Rayalach Mefereshes from the Ramban. Then we got conflicting Eiduyos, and they all come around to the same thing. Meikar Adin, Gedol Yisrael, Stipler, Chazon Ish, and others held Meikar Adin, Kriyas Torah Zechayvas Tzibur. But I have stories that they all went to Kriyas Torah, not quite as incisive as Rabbi Chaim, but they did. They went. They davened at home, but they went to Kriyas Torah. They were machar upon themselves. And then we saw how from Zalman takes this into 4 prate dinim. The chiluk between Shabbos l'shein v'chamishi. Shabbos is a chayvas yachid, and shein v'chamishi is a chayvas tzibur. And maybe this is mefurish in the Rambam and Hilchos Avel. The beautiful raya from the basic nessus being the minyanim being mevutel, but they went to hear Kriyas Torah anyway. Then the raya of the nafkamina ladina of, so that's one nafkamina ladina. Second nafkamina for the explanation of the chiluk between Shabbos and Mincha because of Yeshua Karnais. So there the chiyuv is shein v'chamish is all you call yachid v'yachid, because everybody has a chiyuv not to go gimel yom v'lei Torah. Whereas in the other, on Yeshua Karnais, Shabbos Mincha Yeshua Karnais, there's no, it's really a chiyuv and the tzibur to make sure that they're not a bunch of terrible chronistic stuff. And the third thing we saw was the nafkamina chayvus yachid chayvus tzibur or ben Eretz Yisrael can not mechuyev to hear creating Gantam Sheni. It's a chayvus tzibur, not a chayvus yachid in him. The fourth thing is not mechuyev this year. The National Parsha, don't run around looking this year. If you go to Eretz Yisrael in between, you can hear the kriya of that parsha. Not mechuyev to run around, even though they do make these chutzlarts with 2 parshiyos. Alavayim is only trying to lashon hara by side. I'm not saying this from the Zalman is saying this. The good stuff from Goyin's Mind Rega, less fakes Merkasha from the Goyin's and Haga, and now we have all these 4 things. We still did not see the Arichas of Varm and Egros Moshe. We're going to go further in the Achrayim on this question of Chayvus Tzibur and Chayvus Yachid tomorrow morning and try to wrap it up. Yeah, Hashem will tell you about later. Okay, everybody, side. Please try to be nana to the requests that I made at the beginning. Let us know if you come to Nebrak. See if you can be mishtatif and asiyum in our akar satayv, and hopefully we'll try to create a little bit of a kiddush Hashem. Everybody have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Yashakayach.